I'm just make some introductions. So I hope you know I'm to the PCC for Suffolk. And on my left, we'll go in order. We've got Danny, who are the superintendents covering the Babergh area, and then Gareth Wilson. The inspector. Artificially. Anyway.
After a pay rise.
Anyway, aspiration. Gareth Wilson, the Chief Constable, and two colleagues at the desk there. Chris Jackson, our Chief Executive, and Anna Parkinson, who Anna's taking notes tonight, so that will be put up on the website. And the whole point of this meeting, ladies and gentlemen, is for you to ask questions. It's not for us to sit here boring you to death with talk. And honestly, this is about receiving questions for you, anything you want to talk about. It's very, very important that we hear it now, because it does help shape policing for the future. So you're very welcome to do that. We'd like to finish, I know it's a hot, sticky evening, by 8:30, earlier if you like, but that's generally when we try to wrap these things up. A couple of other points. You've got a set of papers on your chair. There's a leaflet there that explains about the relationship between Gareth, the Chief Constable, and myself, a bit about the budget, some of the commissioning that we do, the grants that we give in support of the voluntary sector, who do some wonderful work here in Suffolk. And as I've said before, without their input and the, I suppose, diversionary tactics, or one of the better words to use, I think Suffolk would be very much worse off without them. There's also some local information, and there's a sheet of little white paper there with your contact details on, and we really would like you to fill that in again. Because of the GDPR changes, we need to ask everybody for your details so we can contact you again. I know it's terribly tedious, that's nothing to do with us locally, and that's what's happened. So I'm not going to talk anymore, because really it's about the questions, and you can bring up any topic you like. So be it civil parking enforcement, visibility, anything like that, particular issues that are of concern to you, or ideas, compliments, we're very happy to receive those as well. That will be very welcome. So I think I'm going to hand on to Gareth to say a few words now, and then you two guys, and then it will be over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to go through a very short input in relation to some of the stuff the constabulary is doing at the moment. Just really to show you what's at the fore of my mind in terms of some of the challenges that we have, and in terms of some of the investments that Tim has allowed us to make in terms of technology, which I think have taken us on significantly over the past few years, but certainly since we last met. First of all, you would have heard when I spoke last time about our increase in demand. In other words, the increase in the activities that we are now seeing. That's both in terms of breadth and in terms of volume. We are seeing a significant increase in 999 calls. The 999 call increase is national. It's people coming to the police and seeking a service from us, and there are a range of reasons as to why that has increased, but it's a significant increase. I also talked last time about the nature of crime. And you'll have heard me talk about the fact that we now have to deal with a significant amount of online crime. A number of you either will have been subject to people trying to get money from you online, or succeeding in getting money from you online, or in some other way trying to use the internet for something other than it was intended for. So we have seen that an awful lot of our investigations are based through technology and necessitate our staff working behind a computer to keep people safe within their homes, as well as when they go out onto the streets as well. I guess the one area that has changed significantly from the last time I gave the input is the fact that we are seeing an upward trend in terms of what we used to describe as the traditional crime. And before we'd have always said that was on a downward trajectory. But you have seen and heard the narrative recently within the national newspapers and local newspapers, which are indicating that increase in terms of some of the violent crimes that we see, and also some of the other crimes in terms of thefts that we see as well. So that has been increasing. So that is causing a significant challenge for us, because with the demand levels increasing, whilst the resource levels have been compressing, we have had to look at how we prioritise. and when we have prioritised quite clearly, we've made sure that we deal with those issues that are the most significant to you all. I think whilst I just talk about demand, Tim has also allowed investment into the 101 system, and that now we do listen to what people say, and we're consistently hearing about 101 and trying to get through on 101. Now the system as it was meant that if you dialed 101, you always only, we only ever charged 15 pence. It was a flat rate call, and that was it. For however long you stayed on the phone for, but we couldn't prioritise you. So if you rang up to say there was an incident taking place at that time, you sat in the queue along with somebody that wanted to talk about a pot of paint that had been stolen 10 years ago. Dealing with the extremes, but I think you get the understanding of where we were in the system. The new system, if you dial 101, you'll get that initial screening from the member of staff concerned at the switchboard, and they'll then put you into a series of lines into the control room. And that goes everything from an emergency to urgent, domestic abuse, and so on and so on and so on, until it's a routine call. What I can say is that system's now been in place for a good few weeks. Our performance in terms of getting through the first few avenues into domestic abuse, as an example, has shown that we are reaching the calls within 90 seconds. We also have had examples of where people have rung up, and there is one example where some gent wanted to let us know that his car had been locked in a car park overnight. It was important to him. He was concerned that we might find it, and we were concerned about it, but that person did stay on the line for a lot longer. So it's a real advantage in terms of some of the stuff that we've got, and it does mean we can get to the most urgent calls even quicker than we could have done beforehand. In addition to that, it also pushes people across onto the internet to allow you to report crime online, and whereas we'd have said before the number of people that hang up is an indicator of poor service, actually we can monitor each individual line through into the control room to make sure that those which require an urgent call actually do get it, and then those actually we try and say there's a better way of doing this. We actually look at how it is that they progress their call past there. We're going to be working on that now. The next phases will come through, and we're going on to things such as web chat, which will allow even quicker route of access for those people that have the ability to do it and choose it. It doesn't mean that we'll be getting rid of all that methods via telephone to get in. It just means that there will be a number of routes in. Just in terms of recent events, I think it would be remiss of me to just not mention the fact that there have been, as you've all seen, some really significant events within Ipswich. Actually, we have been very active in the work around gangs and county lines across the county, because it is a county-wide and countrywide issue. But quite clearly we have been really tested in terms of the resources that we have to ensure that we effectively investigate those incidents, and we are doing that, we are putting the resource in, and we're just making sure that we have been able to deal with what we would call the business as usual as well, so that routine work that's coming through. And I know I've been reporting through to Tim in terms of our ability in relation to do that, and we have been able to do it, and we've done it with the assistance of our collaborative partner, but we've done it as an organisation. Very briefly, technology. I think guys might mention to you some issues around body-worn video. You'd have probably seen it out and about. It's something we've talked about bringing in before. It's a brilliant system whereby our interactions with members of the public are there to be viewed, to be screened, and for us to be held to account for what we've done, but also a really good evidential base as well. So a really good investment. Mobile working, particularly for those that live within rural areas, mean that staff can now be out and about and can come out and speak to you, and it's much better than the old ones. The old ones kind of dropped out all the time, and you couldn't really use them. These ones are really good and have good coverage across the county as well. So that mobile working means they don't have to keep going back to the police station, but they can come out. They don't then have to go and print off statements. They can deal with it, and they can deal with you in one visit as well. I think that's it, Tim, in terms of the few issues I was going to mention.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. Are you both in that?
Yeah, let's go first.
Entirely up to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kevin Horton. I'm responsible for the Hadleigh Suffolk neighbourhood team. Just going to talk about the role of the localities and the local police inspectors, and then Danny will talk about his area, which is Suffolk Great Corner and Babergh West. So in terms of local policing, our job really is to deliver that to the local level in the villages and the towns that we represent. So Hadleigh and the Babergh East areas, some of you may know, so across the Shotley, Pinewood and some villages of mid-Suffolk as well. Our four themes that we focus on really, we focus very much around community engagement, identifying the concerns of the villages. We have a parish forum in Hadleigh that myself and Joe Mear attend, so it's an opportunity for residents to come and actually meet myself, Sergeant Mear, and that is hosted by parish councils, and very appreciative of volunteers who chair and minute those meetings for us. We also look at safeguarding vulnerabilities. We work with domestic abuse victims, people with mental health issues, vulnerable adults, and also look at repeat demands. We talk about increasing demand. We look at actually problem solving, how we can reduce demand on our service, police service, as well as other public sector agencies, and also any crime series that we find, emerging crime series, we support victims, and again looking at if we can problem solve those. But we don't do that alone. Safe Neighbour Team is just one part of the policing model, so we have response officers who come out to Hadleigh, for the Hadleigh area they're based at Landmark House, but you may also come into contact with sort of CID, those from the investigative teams, roads policing come out this way, and obviously the A12, A14, as well as regional crime teams and national bodies that do support us. But we're also very grateful for the volunteers, the supporters, Community Speed Watch, who come out with us. We have days of action where they work with the Safe Neighbour Team and the camera van, very appreciative of those, and all the other volunteers that help us. As I've mentioned, those that help us with public meetings. And the partner agencies we work with, we have close work relationship with Babergh, who help us with social behaviour meetings and addressing some of the issues that we have in this area. So in terms of the engagements, the main issues that have come to us over the past 12 months, in no particular order, road safety and speeding always comes up. So we liaise with the Safety Camera Partnership and the Community Speed Watch, Suffolk Police Policing. We also have dedicated days of action each month where we go around and focus whole teams of focus resources on that particular issue, as well as the engagements and the reduction side of it. Bobbitt's Lane, anyone from that area in Worsted, we know there's an issue with the off-road motorcycles that cause a nuisance. We work with the landowners to try and close off some of those areas, as well as actually dealing with those who are using it. And for our last meeting we had last week, and so that has dropped off in terms of reports in that, with that issue. Theft of power tools has been probably the main crime series we've had in this area. That is not just an issue for Hadleigh, it's county-wide, and actually neighbouring forces are experiencing this. So workmen's vans being broken into, quite high value power tools being stolen. And also in Hadleigh itself, we have had issues around sort of, antisocial behaviour and cannabis use in the evenings. We had a 3-week campaign maybe 2 months ago now, where I actually brought officers from Ipswich over into Hadleigh, because I look after the Safe Neighbour Team in Ipswich as well. Brought those staff over for 3 weeks. I'm very focused around the evening enforcement, but Sergeant Mear is also on the Safe Neighbour Team. We're also now working with other agencies, so the high school, the Porch Project, who I know Mr. Parsons is a supporter of, and the Youth Offending Service. So actually look at intervention and diversion work, those young people who I know have come to notice, we've had reports about in Hadleigh. Body-worn video and cameras, you may see officers with those. They've been really useful, particularly dealing with domestic abuse, where officers initially attend and can get the accounts as well as some of the evidence. And they have been used in court quite successfully. And the officers have got mobile technology, data, the tablets as well, so they're able to about a bit more and use things like Twitter and social media to update you. And it would be remiss if I didn't mention so that the past few weeks, the issues in Hadleigh, in Ipswich, the Hadleigh officers have gone over to support their colleagues over in Ipswich. It was a challenging couple of weeks, but getting back to some sense of normality, and the Hadleigh officers are back in here, but for a period of time we did have to go over to Ipswich and support them. So that is my bit, and very, very briefly, so I will hand over to Danny to do Sudbury.
Hello everyone, my name is Danny Cooper, I'm the Locality Inspector for the Sudbury side. Kevin and I have identical roles, albeit in different localities, different areas. So I won't go over the same things, but I'm sitting there thinking, tick, tick, you know, all the things that Kevin's just mentioned are the same things that are going on over in the Sudbury side. There's 9 localities across the force. So what we'll do is just, for anyone that is here from the Sudbury side, maybe based on those surrounding villages, just touch on some of the issues that we're currently facing over that side. The first thing to mention, we talk about recent events. We had a really unpleasant, nasty, serious sexual offence on the bank holiday over in Sudbury. A lot of resources, quite rightly, brought in, major investigation teams and so on. And I am pleased to report that a man was arrested and charged with a rape offence in Sudbury. And there were great concerns about that after it happened, as you'd expect. So, long way to go. We've got to now build that case and look towards the trial. But that was a good result at that stage, and the victim is being supported for that. Other things that we're working on, our priorities at the moment, drugs in Sudbury. Very briefly, I would break it down. My vision at the moment in Sudbury is 3 different types of drug use dealing. We've got the recreational stuff in the nighttime economy, people snorting cocaine and things like that. We work closely with our licensing team. We go into pubs and we've got some really good landlords, landladies over in Sudbury who will report any drug activity to us. We've got a device that we can take in and it swabs the toilet systems and things and tells us if there is an issue there. One that you hear a lot about, we spoke about it already tonight, another type of drugs is the county lines. That has indeed been a problem in Sudbury. We've had a couple of, this is where dealers from gangs in London come up and may take over addresses and deal their drugs.
Cookery.
Sorry, cookery, exactly that, yes, exactly that. We've had that in Sudbury and we've executed drugs warrants, found drugs, cash, and tried to send them packing, if not to prison. Again, the investigation can take a while. As well as safeguarding the person who had their house taken over, of course. And the final thing is certainly not least of a problem, and these are all intermingled in many ways, as you imagine, are, again, as Kevin's already mentioned, young people and that use of cannabis. We too, over in Sudbury, are seeing that. And as concerned, I said before I came out, an article about confusing from young people about whether it's dangerous or not compared to alcohol. You know, so there's a lot of mixed messages out there. But we've got an operation running over there at the moment called Operation Dodford, and that's linked at tackling the young people that are dealing. We're not seeing the gangs necessarily from London dealing with those drugs, but young people locally have taken up that mantle and are doing it. So we've made arrests, but we're also looking at that education side rather than just trying to punish because they are so young, late teens. Moving on from drugs, excess speed, I know Kevin's mentioned it. I think our process is good for dealing with speeding now. We've got clear things thanks to camera safety teams. We've got community speed watch that Kevin's already mentioned, and the vehicle activated signs that flash up when you drive along. We collect that data. We then bid for the camera team to come out. And in Sudbury and that locality, we've had something 700 plus in the last 9 months drivers reported for offences. That's in addition to verbal warning, so some positive action there in relation to speed. We are also suffering with the vans, the theft of tools from vans. In Sudbury, Great Cornard, an operation, Winston has been set up for that to try and tackle that. A very difficult one to tackle. They come into town and commit crimes and then gone again. You don't see them for another couple of months, so we're alive to that. Kevin and I speak, don't we? And we talk about anything that's cross-border because we work so closely. But they are the main sort of headlines for us at the moment. So I'll leave it there.
Good, right. Well, thanks very much, guys. I think that there's a very clear message there, and I want to be very clear before we get going with questions. These guys do a really good job. If you look at the funding we get in Suffolk, as I've been banging on about for 4 years, we are one of the worst funded forces from the Home Office. We've got to continue with that campaign for Suffolk to get its fair share of national resources. But if you consider that, the fact that the force has once again been rated as good in all categories by HMIC, FRS or whatever it's called now, the Inspectorate, is a highly creditable performance because we have the highest caseload of any other force in the country per officer. I know we can argue about differences, but it really, really is important. The only other thing I forgot to mention, yes, the precept, the council tax did go up by a large 6.8%. That's all my fault, so you can blame me for that. But I would like to share with you, I think we were in a very difficult position. I was being presented with some very unpalatable options for reductions, which I did not want to make. But the point about this, ladies and gentlemen, is, you know, in any elected position, you're there to make choices, not to sit on the fence and make decisions. And the view I took, following quite a lot of consultation, the vast majority of people supported that increase. I know it was big and it's difficult for some people to find that money, but actually it's far better to have a bit extra rather than have to face cutbacks and things like major investigations, roads policing and others. So that was the choice I made, so if you're not happy, you have to blame me for all that, I'm afraid. Anyway, on a lighter note, I also forgot to mention there's an information desk. There's all sorts of leaflets and information. We're always looking for volunteers, good recruits coming into the constabulary. We've had a lot of recruitment passing out parades in the last year or so, which is very welcome news, but we still need to recruit more and good people, of course, to help keep Suffolk safe. So, on that positive note, now it's over to you. So, who would like to have the first question? Gentleman there, please. Thank you.
Hi. I'm part of the Hadleigh Skate Park user group. I was heavily involved in raising money for it. Kind of come along today in terms of kind of the antisocial behaviour and drugs angle. Kind of with a view to sort of seeing what else can be done, really, because I know from speaking to people at the Porch Project and that obviously the police are doing a fair bit in that space already, and certainly know from my own experience that a lot of people causing trouble are already on your radar, working with youth offending things and stuff like that. And sort of with a few other people here, we're kind of looking at whether there's anything else we can do. So from my point of view, as part of the skate park group, we find that a lot of the users of the park are actually really great kids, lovely kids. Some of the kids who are involved with the fundraising group that I look after, they're absolute role models. They're people who volunteer at the Porch Project, they're in the Army Cadets and things like this. They're doing fantastic stuff. And what they get really annoyed with all this stuff around the antisocial behaviour and drugs, which is because a lot of it happens around the park, or the skate park bit, and so consequently the community kind of, not knowing the kind of detail of it, just think that all the skaters are trouble when they're not. And obviously we're getting quite annoyed with that. So we're kind of quite keen to see if there's anything else we can be doing to actually help with that. So obviously there's kind of different elements to it, isn't there? You need the police bit, but you also need the community involvement, and that's dealing with the more complex stuff like the Porch Project will be helping with, but also just the kind of bits that us as a skate park we could do, actually putting on positive activities and that sort of thing. So I think we're kind of quite keen to sort of highlight this as an issue and see if there's anything more we could be doing together.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very, very good point to make, and I think you're absolutely right. These, dare I say it, social issues, be it drugs, gangs, whatever it happens to be, I've said repeatedly in the last few weeks, it's been one hell of a challenge the last few weeks, you can imagine, for the whole of Suffolk. We're not talking about me, I'm talking about all of us. And one thing is very clear, you're not going to get your way out of this thing just by policing and enforcement. I think we need a sensible conversation across the whole county involving everybody. And I think we have strayed off the right path, that parents need to be accountable and responsible for their children. Children need to know the difference between right and wrong. This is not a political comment, but this liberal attitude that anything goes and it's never anybody's fault is unacceptable. Set aside that, where you get pockets of depravity, the youngsters are they the culprits or victims? They're probably both, actually. But of course you can make so much money, and it's the elders, as they call them, those who are 25, 30 years old, are sinister and evil people as far as I'm concerned, need to be taken right out of the streets. But it all comes back to this deprivation and other issue, that the chance to them and the lack of parental role models, I'm afraid is a recurring theme, but that is part of the difficulty. And they groom these youngsters as young as 12 or 13 years old who don't have parental role models, and say, well, what does your mum and dad do this? Well, they're not really bothered. Oh, well, here's a nice pair of trainers or some nice clothes. Then after 2 or 3 weeks, now if you want to stay with us, you're going to have to do these jobs for us. And when you hear of people, youngsters perhaps 12, 13 years old, being acted as drug mules, and of course the laws about prosecution are very different, and of course the elders know that. I also heard of a case in the West Midlands where a girl as young as 14 had a drug debt of £1,800 and was forced into prostitution to pay off the debt, so they were pimped. And all I would say, ladies and gentlemen, just think, if that were your children, your relations, your friends, you'd find that horrendous. And these wicked people know what they're doing, but it's the ringleaders, and we've all got to work together to deal with it. And it's a hell of a problem. That's the biggest threat, I think, for Suffolk at the moment, I'm afraid. So it's very difficult. And on that cheerful note, maybe go for the lady with the red top. Thank you.
I'm glad you mentioned about going into the school, because I was going to ask you about diverting resources or the possibility in education, because it's all well and good dealing with the 7 that you've got, but they're kind of in the system now, and it would be really good to have some kind of programme that's educational, that's preventive, that included parents and children. I volunteer at the night shelter in Ipswich over Christmas, and there was a chap there who came to give a talk to the volunteers about drugs and why people take drugs and the reactions of drugs and what to recognise for the safety of the volunteers. And he was incredibly brilliant at communicating and explaining. And I've actually asked him, would he come and give a talk in Hadleigh? And he will charge us 80 quid an hour. Now that's really cheap, and I've approached the Ports Project to see whether they could use that. I only did it tonight, to see whether we could host an evening for parents and children. Because coming back to what that lady was saying, drugs have always been around, but they are so cheap now. I mean, heroin is like £5. You can buy something. That's cheaper than a packet of cigarettes. So the kids, it's so easy for the kids to get it, to feel good. And I just think, I wonder how much, preventative would be better, or putting money towards that. Whether you can go to schools, you can have a
can I just touch
program.
that? Because just last week, I remember I represent the Suffolk side of the west of the county, but it's the same principle, and we had a workshop about a week ago, and all the partners were there, so health, education, the works, it was a full-day session to get everything out and all the issues we're facing. And what I can say is that we had a chair for a board of governors for schools over on the west side, and they were very much behind, and everyone agreed at that meeting we need to go younger. And they are, as a result of that workshop, police, local authority are going away and they're drawing up an action plan. I'm pretty certain it's happening in Ipswich as well, which will cover Hadleigh. And there will be actions on there, mainly linked to county lines, but of course the cannabis as well, and that is covered. So there was, what I'm trying to reassure you and say that's definitely been accepted.
Good.
And that governor, the chair of governors, was going to do a briefing paper to schools and things like that. That's some of the actions that came out.
Because I definitely think with all the resources and academies and everyone having their own budgets, they think, oh, actually, we haven't really got a problem here. So they might not think about spending that money, but I think it's actually essential. Because these are our children, and we need to support them and look after them.
And I think that has been
we
accepted.
We can't let them just sink.
You can't write generational.
We can't. It's our responsibility. We have the voice, they don't. And it is our responsibility to look after them.
And education is good. There's definitely, I've got teenage children myself, there's definitely this feeling that cannabis is fine now. And it's linked to, there'll be social media, they'll all be talking on there saying it's fine, and that's what we've got to try for the younger ones.
Yeah, and there's the whole peer pressure thing, and
no.
role models are Love Island. Do you know, it's kind of...
And what Danny said, I think, is a really important point that gets overlooked. Most of the people who work in Suffolk Constabulary, obviously the right age, have got children who are minors or other halves who live and work in Suffolk and go to school in Suffolk. So I'm sure, we'll put words in your mouth, you feel that, just like everybody else. So,
I know, and I think it is very hard as well, because the lifestyle we all lead, a lot of parents work full time, and it is hard to keep on top of the kid. I'm not excusing that, but some parents find it easier to keep control of their kids than others. It's hard.
Being a parent, I know.
It is hard.
It's not easy. We've got 3 boys with a young man now. It's a job and a half.
I also think, just on it briefly, just that going in the primary schools really early on to give them the facilities and enable them to work out ways of judging how to behave when they're approached by somebody else, by another child or a slightly older child. How am I going to deal with this? When this guy who's coming up to me, and I really admire him because he looks really brilliant, how do I say no to him? How do I move away? And then you can give him the confidence.
And just to answer that point, we spoke about this action plan, but already, I don't know if you've heard of that thing called Crucial Crew.
Yes.
And those, they set up scenarios for primary school children. It's done pretty much over the county, I think. Here and Surrey, everywhere. And they have scenarios like that. So what would you do if you saw someone laying there unconscious, or drugs can be introduced, and they're talking about doing the county lines one at the moment. Drugs.
That's good.
So that is started already, but this action plan will just add to that.
I mean, we just want to make sure, Hadleigh, that we are on it and we are helping our kids.
Well, I'm sure Gareth obviously can speak. We are committed to doing it. What I would also ask, I would make a plea to you, let's get the right English right, talk to county council, other councils. They need to do their share as well. And I'm not trying to be wet and soppy about this. We can't do everything. I think we do more than our share of that. And we're committed, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say no, it's really important. The youngsters are our future. Always take the premise no child is fundamentally more bad or evil, it's what happens to them. Adverse childhood experience, I think it's a technical phrase now. We will do our share, we are committed to that, but please can we get others to join in as well? And that's where I think there are a few missing links. And I know it's difficult, everybody wants this, wants that, wants everything, but somehow we can't, we've got to find a better way to do it, absolutely crucial.
Well, we've had support from Mick, who's our county councillor,
Yeah.
so
Oh no, I'm not being,
joining
yeah,
up.
of course.
Yeah.
And that's really important, we work together, that's the way forward. Okay, well thank you very much to them.
Okay.
There was a gentleman at the back.
Yeah, I've got 2 or 3 points if I may. They're more general really, but they link to what's been said already. Firstly, if you look at, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you look at the structure of the neighbourhood, say the neighbourhood's team, you've only got 3 police officers on it. Now, apart from the sergeant days, and the PCSOs are not allowed to work after 6 o'clock. So if you then say, right, there's only 3 PCs who can work after 6, and if you then look at the time they're going to work and their days off and everything, it seems, certainly on paper, as if there is nobody after 6 o'clock at times on duty during an average week. And linked to that, I've seen recently about the new community engagement officers, and I wonder how they'll fit in.
Okay, let's run down Gareth Street.
Let's start off with the first bit of the answer for me, so thank you. First of all, can I just come back to your point about prevention being better in the long run? It's absolutely where we want to get to, and that is the role of the Safe the Neighbourhood team. Because it's interesting we talk about it, we've talked about so many resources, we've talked about passive drug stock being taken out, which is one element. We usually talk about road policing at some point as well. Sometimes we concentrate on actually there are only 3 members of staff there, and that's not very good. Those 3 members of staff and the PCSOs are put together to do that long-term problem solving, because otherwise we will keep coming to the cricket club or the skate park or wherever else it is, because we need to make sure we resolve some of those issues. So when we did the work around the Suffolk Local Policing Review, we did look at the role of the PCSO. And I must say, when I came into the organisation, it's really clear there were probably as many different roles for the PCSO as there were PCSOs. It really was fragmented. So their entire role is to make sure what we call problem solve our way out of the issue. So they're the ones that will be running as part of the workshops, engaging with young people, doing the diversion work, mental health, chronically excluded people. So they do a lot of work around that. So that's why their hours were reduced, because actually with the resource we had, if we had them working in the evenings, that wasn't when our partners were working. So we had some real issues. So I wouldn't look at them as just the 3. It is actually part of a whole structure, which is actually pretty big. And they are here to enable us to do that work around that long-term solution to what otherwise would be just firegating all the time and just turning up. The engagement officer is a really good example of where actually Tim and I come out to these meetings and we have some really good conversations, and we pick up these themes. Usually people from Neighbourhood Watch here or Speed Watch or something are saying we don't have a very good link in with constabulary. We're really concerned that we're not communicating out enough, listening to you face-to-face, social media, whatever it is in terms of that debate and discussion, and their role is to very much make sure they're part of your community, listening to you, talking to you, and bringing stuff back so we can actually deal with the core concerns that you have. Because I was concerned, and I know Tim was very concerned about the number of times that people had raised the fact that I don't think we're listening to what their concerns are. So that's why they've been brought in. I think it's a really good compliment.
So are they going to be kind of protected, as it were, or are they going to be dragged off to Ipswich if there's a big thing in Ipswich?
I can never say never, okay? Because we do flex our resources. What I can say is they are the vital element that we have, which is about that consistent member of staff that you can build up a relationship with and that you can talk to. So I'll never say never. What I can say is I don't want it to happen. Okay?
There's one other thing, if I can just follow up slightly, linking into the drugs really. I had a really interesting day with a young man from the Sudbury area as it happened. And he's, you know, sort of a respectable young chap, but his knowledge of the drug dealing in Sudbury is incredible. He was talking to me about a safe house where a guy's house had been raided, but they didn't know about the safe house. And there's all sorts of other things, you know, which I won't go into now. But my question really is, are you trying to tap into that information so that you know where to look and what to do? Because people of his sort of age are there, they're not necessarily part of it, but they're well aware of what's going on.
We can't work without the community. I think it's as simple as that.
But how do you reach out to them?
So there's a lot of stuff we do to reach out to young people as well. We do with young people. There's also what I call the more covert side of our world. So the stuff we don't talk about very much, which is very much making sure that we can identify where there are people that we might want to speak to about the drugs trade, and they are very seasoned individuals that can have conversations and make sure that people can give information if they want to. We also really encourage Crime Stoppers, and there is a young person's version of Crime Stoppers as well, and a website which in fact Tim and I had a presentation recently which we're really going to push as well, so people can come across and they can give us information in a variety of different ways. People don't always want to talk to the cops, so we actually do work with our partners as well. We get intelligence off our partners to make sure that we have that broader picture. I must say, whilst we'll never know everything that goes on in the community, that's I think one of the skills of Suffolk is we do have a really good relationship with partners and with communities, and we do tend to know what the issues are. So you know, it's our role then to build it up by whatever means that we can do that's lawful. But we do do a lot of enforcement proactively rather than waiting for something to happen.
If I'm just suggesting that you really push that, the young person, because I was talking to him about Crime Stoppers, because I was well aware of it, and it was obviously quite new to him, and he was very reluctant because he didn't want to get involved.
Deprivation is very clearly linked with high levels of deprivation, poor educational standards, and high levels of abuse, addiction, and crime. And the answer to that is for everybody to work together. This is not a throwaway comment. If you look at things like economic development, and that has to be all agencies involved, obviously with the support of the private sector, the voluntary and charitable sector, to do that. You mentioned the Porch Project. I am very, very keen, as I said earlier, the work the charitable and voluntary sector does in this county is second to none. And the Porch Project, we've just given a grant, for example, to extend it over into Cornwall in Sudbury. That was £20,000 of yours and my money, certainly not mine, it belongs to all of us. And the levels of antisocial behaviour there since the start have dropped a great deal. And the reason I mention this is because if we don't give youngsters opportunities for constructive activities, it leads to trouble. That, in my view, is part of the difficulty in Ipswich at the moment, and we have to find a way of doing that. Now, it's almost, we need even more of that. The problem that I suppose I have to say here, and this is that we don't have limitless resources, but what we are prepared to do is to put money with our grant scheme, and there's some details there in the pack, but we need other people to try and match that fund. You can't leave it just to the policing straight PCC.
That's what we're kind of looking at ideally. Speaking to the Porch Project, I think you can see that there's a lot of effort going in from the police already.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit more resource needed in terms of the Porch Project. They need more capacity for the demand that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And then I think there's something around the kind of working with the young people who are not causing trouble to make sure they don't sit down there, because that's one of my biggest concerns lately. The trouble predominantly always used to be that it was not the skate park users. Wasn't a problem, but I can see now there's the odd one that's starting to get drawn into that, and we want to kind of get in there and do something. Well, obviously I know you've given kind of that money to the Porch Project, but I think we need to be looking as a community at a way to kind of give them a bit more capacity to do a bit more. I think I do get the feeling that there's probably a need for a little bit more presence from the police as well.
Well, just say,
because actually what we've got here is all that stuff's already happening, and there's still some issues.
Yeah.
So we need to sort of ramp things up, and certainly myself as part of the skate park group, and got a few people behind me as well who have all kind of had a meet up recently to look if there's anything more we can do. So we quite like to be kind of meeting with the local police to see what more we can do.
Well. We are there to help. Obviously there is a limit, we can't fund everything, but we're relatively at the beginning of the year. There is still quite a lot of money left in this, so please talk to us. But shall we just get a view from the local inspectors on this one, and then we'll come back to you, because I think it's a very good idea and we want to do what we can to help, certainly.
So I think in terms of the general things we've talked about, so the intervention diversion is the key bit now. So we did the bring the police down, did the enforcement there. We know it's a core group, it's core individuals, but the bit we'll do, or Sergeant Mears doing now, is around mapping the intervention diversion work around it. So I know she's got a meeting with the high school, she had it this morning actually, 9 o'clock this morning, and she's now looking at what opportunities are to stop people re-offending and obviously to get off the path that they're potentially going down. So what I'm going to suggest is afterwards, if you make sure you speak to me, because I know Joe wants to have a meeting with the Porch Project School and anyone else who has actually got the time and resources and facilities to actually engage with these people and and change their behaviour really. So it's a small number, I think, really, that we're looking at.
It is, and I think what we have to be careful of is that the people that we want to engage with young people are people who are highly trained. They're good youth leaders, they've got good facilities and good experience. Can't expect sort of ordinary people to go in because they need well-trained, expert people.
Absolutely, and I know some of this group will be going through the youth offending service. Obviously, they'll be dealing. We've got turning points and others. So we just need to map out what there is available in terms of community resources. Look at the group. Look at what's being done in terms of intervention. But Joe just needs to pull that meeting together. So if you give me your details afterwards, you can set that meeting up afterwards.
Inspector Horton, I'm the chairman of Hadleigh Cricket Club. You mentioned earlier that you had a 3-week targeted on Hadleigh.
They think they came out to the cricket club, didn't they?
Yeah, well, the point you made is, and the Commissioner's right, we've all got to work together to get this done. But 3 weeks, we've had 6 months of vandalism, antisocial behaviour, theft, criminal damage, drug taking, the lot. And it's still going on. So a 3-week window at 6 months is, not acceptable.
I think this is absolutely where Tim was talking earlier on. We can carry on enforcing, we can carry on popping there, unless the root causes are sorted out. It will be either displaced or we'll carry on. We can't be there every minute.
I understand that.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you would expect that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is,
but also,
actually, this is about the diversionary work, so that additional work in the Porch project we've talked about, because it's only through diversion, it's only through dealing with the root causes that we will actually come up with a solution.
But we're 6 months into this, causing damage down the cricket club, costing the club a lot of money, and this is a club that has, over 100 kids off the streets in the summer for you.
Yeah.
But, we're not seeing any progress here. And you mentioned earlier the 101.
Yeah.
Well, that was the advice we got. We couldn't get through.
How long ago was that?
When it was at the height of it, so beginning of May.
Yeah, so the new system now, if there's something that's ongoing,
but
we will get through quicker.
In terms of cricket, we don't need officers. We don't need officers there when the cricket club is in full swing. Because they don't come down there. What we need is more police presence, more dealing with it when it's there. We don't, with respect to your guys with the resource, there's no point them coming down when we're playing cricket.
No.
Because it isn't happening.
No, that's not what's suggested.
And when we do Dial 101, it's,
So it should be better now.
It's not happening.
No, well, it's only come in the last 2 or 3 or 4 weeks actually, so that may be, but it is better. It doesn't mean it's always going to be answered more quickly.
No.
Please remember, if there are issues, put them in emails, and as a last resort, contact us.
I have written to Inspector Horton back at the beginning of May, so...
Right, okay. But if you're still not happy, I'll tell you why it's important for you to contact us, not for me to chew these guys up, it's not about that. But you see, one of the big problems you've got with policing, and again, this is part of this general discussion, the demands put on policing for missing children that might be from social services, dealing with mental health issues, covering up on occasions for the ambulance services, it takes a huge amount of time away. So we've got to get that balance shifted. So for me, if you like, bending my ear about it, helps me to say to others, look, I'm getting fed up with this. Here's a bill to the ambulance service. Obviously, you don't expect that to get paid. But that's how we really have an opportunity to say to the government about funding for Suffolk. And Gareth and I were at a meeting last week, and I'm really serious about this. There is a door potentially open, but we need the evidence, and the public feedback for these difficulties is, believe it or not, really helpful. I don't have a magic wand, of course, and I would love to have more resource so we could say to these guys, look, you can have another 200 officers and just do all that, but we have to live within our means, and it is really difficult, and nobody here, I know, none of us are disagreeing with what you say. It's really frustrating and very annoying. But certainly, I'm sure they will definitely do what they can. We will continue to have conversations, but please bend my ear about all these things as well, because it does help take the case forward. Still come back to the case of what the hell's the matter with some parents when they've got children 11, 12, 13 lounging about at night. They should be thoroughly ashamed of themselves. But that doesn't solve it in the short term.
No, it doesn't.
But we've got to pressurise people.
Yeah.
And I absolutely agree with you.
I think as well, you talked about resource earlier. Surely you guys have to balance up the resource, and a town the size of Hadleigh with no police presence after 5 o'clock.
There is police presence.
That isn't what we were told.
Well,
after
no,
5 o'clock,
these
we were
guys
told
understand
to
because
ring
it's
101.
operation.
That is
a mistake.
Full-time police presence.
There is police presence.
Full-time police
because you
presence.
have response officers come and base themselves at Hadleigh 24/7. So they come across, I mean, they just pick the car keys up at Landmark and they come over here. So you have those. You do have the police officers from the state of Neighbourhood team, and when they're on legs, they are in Hadleigh. So they are dealing with it. And I know, I don't know if it was yourself that came across them with the passive drugs dog. So some from the cricket club did come across them. So they are down there.
Yeah, but with respect, they turned up that night when there was a game going on.
Yeah.
Which is about as much use as a chocolate
I know.
fire gun.
I know.
What we need
then
to
you probably
do.
won't know if you're not there when they do that.
Absolutely, but that's the resource issue, isn't it? You need to be better with your resources when you're going to come, because they're not going to be there when we're playing cricket.
I think we will take definitely.
I think just be part of that conversation.
It's all being noted down, and I promise you these are serious, taken seriously and used. So
And we in the skateboard club there are in the same boat, without a doubt.
got that. Now, and I quite understand, nobody's trying to put you down or anything like that, we'll definitely take that forward. Now, I'm going to try and take turn. We've got the lady here, then the lady in red, and then the gentleman.
I was just asking, basically hearing everything that's going on, and these people are obviously on your radar, and they're re-offenders, antisocial. So what sort of action do you actually take? You can slap on the wrist. We all want them to be saved and to be rehabilitated or whatever, but is it a slap on the wrist so they say, ha, that's all that matters, and they go and do it again? What by law, how far can you go?
I mean, the ones we're talking about at the moment are actually been through the court process and have actually had the referrals from the courts to the youth offending service. So actually going through programmes with the youth offending service. And we've got, I think it's 7 that have been dealt with at the moment, who again will very likely go through that process and hopefully get those referral orders through the youth offending.
And are their parents involved? Do their parents get involved?
So I mean, I've actually met with some parents as well, because some parents actually come to me and actually ask for help, because they're struggling.
Right.
So we are working with some of the parents. But yeah, the parents, the Suffolk Family Focus, which we've not heard of, but it works with troubled families and meets with parents. They've actually come across and met with some of these families as well to try and actually look at what the underlying problems are and why they are struggling. So we've had their intervention as well. So it's trying to be holistic as much as we can to reduce that long-term issue.
I think the other thing, just to say, and funny enough, Gareth and I, the local criminal justice board, we did raise this issue about sentencing. And when I'm talking about sentencing, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking about confinement necessarily. It depends on who the individuals are. But I do think we've got to make sure that sentencing is appropriate. In other words, if these people are frankly being a complete pain in the backside, it's not just a matter of slap on the wrist. I think it's got to be something that actually demonstrates their bad behaviour is unacceptable. There is a sanction. You then have to enforce it. But part of the difficulty is, as I was saying earlier, I think we've become far too liberal with a small L in our approach, and that difference between right and wrong. So it's a very complicated picture, and what we're really trying to do is to put things right. Perhaps 20 or 30 years we've allowed to get to this state, and we all suffer as a result. So it is about diversionary tactics. I personally think, and that's one of the reasons we've got 3 PCSOs, not much of a resource, but a lot better known to liaise with schools, and I think we've got to start acting more in the primary schools, I'm afraid, dare I say it. And I was at a primary school, funny enough, on Friday. These things do make a difference because the children there are not entangled in this. So if we can make sure, and I'm not blaming teachers here because they're under pressure, the right education and opportunities, that is a long-term solution. But coupled with what's happening in the short term, clearly more enforcement, it is a matter of balance of choice. You're absolutely right, which is why we will take those comments away and see what can be done. So something, can't promise everything, but we can promise that something will be done.
Can I just say, I mean, to me, with drugs, with all the county lines and everything that's going on, to me, with drugs, it's not just yesterday that people have been saying don't take drugs. We were out saying 20 years ago, drugs are bad, drugs are bad. So these youngsters know, or youngsters, whoever, middle-aged, they know that they're going against the law, cocaine and heroin, whatever. And I just don't understand why there's so much of it, why, to me, it seems that the sentencing is not strong enough. An example is not being pushed, so hence they say, well, we can get away with it, and they just carry on doing it.
I'd agree with that for the ringleaders. I'm not talking about
Yeah, the young person's like really good. We've had a good presentation, so it's a good point. We'll push that even harder.
Can I just make a summary? Because yeah, we talked about PCSOs and their role. There's a PCSO in Suffolk whose role is single point of contact for schools, and he's very much into the schools. He's in there so often, he does presentations and things like that. So, and the idea of that is it becomes that familiar face that I remember having at school as well. And so that trust is hopefully there, that he will trust, that person will trust Grant Skeggs, the PCSO, to go and tell him information. But we've got to be careful about saying, well, you come over here, tell me about this, because that's a different, we can't do that. But I'm really interested in that case because I talked in my own area about the person we've arrested and so on, and I do have a bit of a mystery at the moment as to where drugs are being stored. So if you could go back, and
we'll give you the
use
details.
any of those, I'm absolutely serious here because I find it really frustrating. If any method that you can think of, Crime Stoppers or anything else, if you can pass that information, it can be anonymous and it would be helpful.
That's a very good time just to mention that a couple of months ago we launched a pilot project we'll call Citizens in Policing. It's a new volunteering scheme. It's about working, liaising with SMTs. You don't have powers, but it's picking up that soft intelligence information. So if anybody's interested or you think you could know of anybody who might like to help with that, there's some information on that. Equally, if you've got any ideas about volunteering in a particular area, be it with schools or wherever, we would love to hear from you because we had someone the other day, so why don't you get tractor drivers? We've got volunteers on horseback, high up, but actually that's quite a good thing for rural areas. We'll have to see how that works. So we're taking that forward, and that only came up, I think it was last Friday. So anybody's got any ideas, more general appeal, there is a pamphlet over there about volunteering, but we want ideas. So thank you very much, Fraser. I'll come to the gentleman there, then I will come over to this side, okay?
Okay, thanks Tim. So I'm going to start actually by giving you some praise. I know you've had a lot of people saying we need this and that other. So Gareth, I just want to call out one of your officers. My family and I were subjected to quite abusive, antisocial behaviour. It was awful actually. But Officer Dybel, he did a fantastic job, and praise where it's due. You never get a chance to actually thank someone when they solve it. But please pass on our thanks. It was really, really well investigated and brought to a great conclusion. But I just want to pick up on a few of the points here, and I'm also from the cricket club. Don't worry, I'm not going to jump on you too much. But Tim, you're absolutely right. The community does need to come. When we were growing up, when I was growing up, it wasn't drugs, it was alcohol, and it was youngsters hanging around car parks, etc., and drinking that to excess because they had nowhere to go. So it wasn't that you wanted to drink alcohol necessarily, it's just that you kind of congregate. What are you going to do? Other than just have a chat? Well, you're not going to drink a bottle of Coke or a bottle of lemonade or something, so I want to bring some whiskey or a bottle of vodka or some alcohol, and now it's drugs. So that's the kind of root problem. You're right, we need to work with the councils to provide greater accessibility to the youngsters to go to these kind of clubs outside of sporting environments, because not everyone floats their boat with sport, whether it's cricket or skateboarding or whatever it is. It's about how do you just hang out as a youngster? Because the concern we've got at the cricket club, go back to that, is that they've been smoking. It is drugs, but it could be just smoking under the colours. Now, if they catch light, there could be a death, and it could be a death, and it's really concerning that we don't want to have tragic circumstances that just happen in Ipswich, but then suddenly there's a big kind of flooding of the area with resource, etc. That's what we don't want to happen, and that's what we're really concerned about. Yes, there's damage to the wicket. Yes, that's annoying. Yes, it costs us money. That's kind of ancillary, really. It's someone might actually die, and that's the real concern.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I think that's an excellent comment. And you're absolutely right. It's not all about sport. I mean, I do a lot of rugby refereeing for juniors as well as adults and something still. But That's really good, and it does work for a lot of people. That's why just using the porch project's not the only thing we fund like that, because it's got such a wide range of activities it does. I think it's a real help, and I just wish we had more resources, we could do more things like that. So we will definitely continue to do, as long as I'm here, we'll definitely continue to do that, and always looking at new ideas. You know, when you look from the policing point of view, if it actually helps to reduce demand, well, obviously that's a sensible thing to do. And as I've said earlier, you know, the youngsters are our future. You know, when we're all in our dotage or whatever, we'll can't do all these things ourselves. So it's important we have the right mindset for that. But my God, we've got a lot to do on that. We really, really have. But you know, I'm sort of stretching out the hand there to work with everybody. As I say, that is definitely the way to go. So thank you very much for saying that, and we are definitely right behind you. Now, is everybody done this side? And we'll come over to this side. Now, Mr. Hawke.
I'd just like to ask the inspectors.
Yeah, because you've been before, we can't go into all of that.
It'll just be a very brief answer
Right.
I can get.
Okay.
It's just that last year there was 1,378 strip searches in Suffolk. Right? This is an increase of 55% from 2016. 155 of these were a positive find, so these people had something on them. But 88% of them didn't have anything. I'd just like to ask the inspectors, how do you intend on improving the actual positive find rate in your areas?
So this is an answer for me because it's county-wide, so it only covers certain areas. We have answered that twice now.
How would you
for you? So just people haven't been at the other meetings, so it's really important that they hear. So a strip search is undertaken when somebody is brought into custody, and there are very strict guidance in relation to when we can and can't do it. But it's basically where we think there's something that could harm themselves or others, and that's the very abridged version of it. The custody blocks are all video recorded. The justification has to be written down. We've gone into the work I've done nationally, because what I really want to do is open up the organisation so people can come in and have a look at that. We were one of the, if not the forerunner, we were certainly one of the first group of people to open up our stop search, which I know you've talked about before, to have a look. So our view is the use of force. So when people use batons and tasers and stuff like that, we want to open up for people to scrutinise in the same way, and strip search as well. The one bit of information which I haven't shared with you because I wouldn't ask the question was my initial intelligence, and I'll leave it as far as that at the moment, is that custody sergeants have been ticking the strip search box when they've changed somebody from their clothing into paper suits. I don't know if that is the accurate answer, which is why I say intelligence, but that's what I've been told in the first instance, so I'll ask for more work to be done, which may account for the increase.
Yeah,
so I will come back to you and answer that. And there are issues about actually whether we should be putting people in those paper suits as often as they are. So I don't know for definite, but that's the one bit I haven't explained to you before. But if anybody's ever been into our custody blocks for the right reason, I won't ask if anybody's been in for the wrong reason. If anybody's been in for the right reason, when you go in there, when I used to go in there, I said this last time, when I was a custody sergeant, there used to be me in there a lot of the time by myself. Now there are a good level of resources because of the level of risk there is in there of people harming themselves or being in an alcoholic-induced state or drug-induced state and being a real danger to themselves. So there's a lot more people now, but what you have are microphones everywhere and cameras everywhere which record everything you do. And we are subject to independent scrutiny from inspections as well.
What do you do if someone refuses? If someone's being awkward and they refuse to be strip searched, what can you do under those circumstances?
We can use reasonable force.
Can you forcibly take the clothes off?
Can I just say, we are trained, there's a lot of training that goes into what we do with it. We use that a lot, and actually it's not that often.
And you've also got to use that a lot, and 88% of the time.
Yeah, you have to use that is what I'd say. But it's important. Our staff are there to talk to people. Actually, you can usually discuss and have a rational conversation, but you can have a rational conversation. And the one thing that we do, when we look at, when they're taught about the use of force, they know about the escalation, and they have to justify the level that they go to in terms of that force. And that's one thing we really impress on people, is about where they can go to and when, and the escalation. So you can't go, use strip search, whack. It really, I know I'm saying the obvious, but it's a discussion that you have. you ask them to do it. You've seen 24 Hours of Police Custody, I'm sure. We all love watching it. It's a good programme. But if you look at that, it's when you look at that, you'll see how the custody sergeants work. If you haven't, it really is worth watching because it's a really good insight into the work that we do. So you use that an awful lot is the answer. But what I'll do is, once we know for definite, because I know you do like coming and asking the question, I think it's really important that we share the answer back to you.
Just on a wider subject, ladies and gentlemen, one of the ways that part of my role is the public interest, Suffolk's interest, holding the constabulary to account through Gareth. So every month we have what we call an accountability performance panel, one absolutely taking place tomorrow. You can all come along if you want to. I'm sure you won't. But on a serious point, that's where we look at performance. Issues like stop and search and so on, we look at that very carefully. And I think it's fair to say, I'm not there just to be bloody-minded, but I do ask some pretty searching questions. And that's what it's about. Really important service, public service policing. If we're not safe and secure, as I've said before, it needs to be done properly. But that's a very good dialogue, and actually these meetings do help provide me with some of the materials and the team to ask the constabulary what's going on. John has been to them doing our camera manage. Make a point, thank you very much for filming it. It'll be all on the website as soon as we can. So that's how it works. So these meetings are an important part of that process of accountability because I am there to represent you, everybody. Very easy, of course, everybody's views, so very important. But thank you for raising that. Now, we have the gentleman here.
Yeah, I'm the speed watch coordinator for Little Walkinsville. And I've never yet, I've been doing it for 3 years and no one has ever come to me and say, we'd like to come out with you. Point number one. Number two is there a way that we can be given any more up-to-date guns to use? Because the ones that we are given are very heavy, cumbersome, and not very accurate because of the incoming and outgoing, where the laser one that you guys use obviously pins on something and locks on.
Yeah, I mean, for the first part, simple to solve. We don't need to go out to community service because it all comes in, all the data comes in through an electronic means or through the post, and that's the important thing. However, it's simple for me to fix. If you can let me have your details at the end, and I'll get someone to come out. I mean, you would have had the visit for the initial site survey and so on. So that's.
I had on occasions last year gone out with Hannah.
Ah, okay. Well, Hannah Party.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's who I would send you, someone like Hannah. So
she's my next door neighbour.
Oh, right. That's who I send Hannah.
I'm talking about that's just on a very odd occasion when she might have a bit of time.
I see what you mean. Okay, no, I would get someone else to do that. Yeah, but one of Hannah's colleagues, it would be just to catch up. Right, that's funding.
So it's usually funded through joint funding through the county council do an awful lot, parish councils are match funded, and there is a website where you can go on to and purchase more up to date.
So the parish council or the Babergh?
It's down to individual agencies to decide. So I'm not saying they will provide money. I'm saying the ones that we see more often than not now are where there are some joint funding initiatives between different bodies.
There may be some possibilities for that through the Road Safety Board, which is the surplus money that comes from people who go on the speed awareness course. That is ring-fenced just to improve road safety. We do a lot with the voluntary sector and community speed. And by the way, we are very, very grateful for all that you do. As we all volunteer, we do need now. So that's probably the best thing to do. Go through the coordinator, let us know what's required.
It's just worth mentioning that they were given, so the coordinators were given an award last week for the amount of work. So that's how important we do. I mean, people often miss road safety. Biggest killer of people that in terms of our line of business in the county. One of the fatal for excess speed, and the work that's done is phenomenal from community speed.
Can I just add one quick point on that as well? For me, community speed watch is very much about setting that, giving that location a reputation for speed enforcement. And personally, I don't see the need for those laser pointing devices. They're expensive. The impact, and I know that when I do Hadleigh as well, I look after Hadleigh and I travel through the various villages. Cavendish has got a really good reputation, and even when they're not there, everyone in front of them, you see them slowing down because they think they're going to be there, and that's where community speed watch is so helpful. As opposed to, the letters are effective that go out, the visits ultimately, but it is that reputation, building a reputation for that area, that is the most important speed watch.
The only thing is, of course, we have people that see us and then accelerate through us.
Right,
To speed to 56, 57 miles an hour.
So that's what you're trying to combat, is it? With the
Yeah,
race?
so when that is when you do need to speak to the Safe Neighbourhood team, because I absolutely expect us to come back and be the last laugh, if I'm honest with you, because for me, if somebody's doing that and sticking two fingers up it, we'll get there, we'll go to court if they're doing the sort of excess speeds of pushing up. If they do that, we'll get to court.
And to prove that point, PC Marshall was at Hadleigh way, but he took some cadets out to do some speed watch stuff, and a gentleman stuck his middle finger up with the cadets. And Darren actually went round and dealt with him for a public order offence for that. So totally share that.
The other thing that we don't see very much of, certainly in the rewarding field, is the safety car or the camera car.
Right.
I presume there's only one in Suffolk that goes.
Oh, well, no. Since the last 5 years, so there's 3 of the big sort of transit type vans, and there's roads policing that also do it, and we are one of the very few counties where we actually increase roads policing capacity instead of cutting it even further. I think I could possibly claim a little bit of credit for that, but the reason for that is because keeping our roads flowing, that is the lifeblood of everything we do in the county, and it's just got to be done. But in addition to that, from the funding from that surplus money Road Safe Board, we had 2 small Fiesta type vans that were launched 2 years ago. Another one is now on stream, we're just waiting to recruit another one, so there's now going to be 4.
Good.
So actually, there's that. Plus, there are 4 motorbikes that was around the road casualty reduction team. We didn't have that 3 years ago. So there's a huge amount gone into that. And dare I say it, still, I'm afraid to say, last year there was around 40,000 people done for speeding in the county, and that includes the outward speed cameras on the Oil Bridge and the A12. So a huge amount is being done, but if you have a difficulty like that, you know, as Danny was saying, Gareth, talk to your Safer Neighbourhood team. They can arrange for proper enforcement with the straight there to come and support you guys doing it. And there's a lot done. We've got all sorts of data. I have a monthly meeting with the head of roads police to make sure that's all being done, because it is of major concern wherever you go near these meetings. It's not parking and speeding, there wouldn't be much else to discuss.
So would I go to you to get it done? Because where I live, in Upper Leven, I've lived there now for just for 3 years and there's been 5 accidents already.
We come to and talk to us about setting up a community speed watch and what the options are. But if there's been lots of accidents around there, we can actually look at who's some of the county council as well, if there's actually a line engineering problem. So yeah, come and speak to us.
One of the problems with some of this data, when you get 3 or 4 agencies involved, which includes the county council, getting that good communication and getting the information extracting, it can be a challenge. I mean, it does come, but sometimes it just takes a bit longer than perhaps it needs to. But we are very much on the case. As I say, that fund that we have, I think it was about £600,000-700,000 last year that was spent in fence improving road safety. So that sort of shows the scale of it. But the big problem we have in Suffolk, and you may well not be surprised about this, the most likely group of people to have killed or serious injuries are young blokes 18 to 25 years old. And it's even worse when it comes to motorbikes. We have one of the worst records, and that's because of the rural nature, the very unique settlement pattern. We've got something like 480 villages and hamlets in Suffolk, which is a colossal number. We have a very antiquated road network, and of course if younger people want to get to work and all that, a lot of them can't afford to have their own car, let's say, and then they go on a moped, motorbike, whatever you call it, and then sadly those are some of the consequences. So we are putting a lot of money in for education on that, making sure we've got opportunities for young first-time drivers to perhaps go on some advanced driving course. I'm afraid that was another victim of austerity going back a few years. Used to get the Pass Plus scheme, our older 2 boys did that. Subsidised course, still cost £100, but it definitely makes a difference to the driving standards. So it's a really serious issue, and as I've often said to people, well, if it was one of your loved ones that was in an accident and got seriously hurt, well, we just got to try and do a lot more on that. So that's another big demand on what we do. But we do genuinely take it really seriously, and I think the evidence is there to prove that. But thank you very much for raising that. Any other questions? Gentlemen, then I'll come to you.
It's more of an observation than a question, and that's going back to these diversionary activities we were talking about. And I think it's important for people to understand that sports clubs do a tremendous job in the number of youngsters they attract. Most schools as well have lots of after-school clubs, but they're not designed for the sort of youngsters we're talking about. That is not the ethos these youngsters want. If you're an antisocial youngster, you're antisocial probably because you haven't coped with that kind of activity at school, and you certainly wouldn't have the confidence to go to an activity that was organised. And I think we have to look back to the past at things that perhaps did work better. And that was the council-funded youth clubs where you had council youth workers. Very few these days, and yet they ran activities that actually were non-competitive, non-judgmental, non-hierarchical. And many youngsters could fit in with that, and also it brought the benefit that there was very good communication if things were going wrong, and people would have quiet words. So I think when we're thinking about activities like that, we ought to think about perhaps what we're trying to do with these youngsters and whether it's doing the right thing to attract them. The other thing, which is totally negative, if you like, I go back, I was a teacher and various other things in education, and I remember in my first school we had something called a Saturday morning detention. Now that was very, very unpopular. Very, it's unpopular with the teachers who have to run it, I have to say as well. But the point is that it took youngsters away from the social activity that they wanted to be involved in. And we didn't have mobile phones then, but if we could just, if you get to that level, if the judicial system could have some method of taking youngsters away for a period of time, you know, so many evenings or something, without their mobile phones, I think that might be quite a strong deterrence, because they survive and they become more antisocial because of the way they interact with the youngsters around them, and because of the, you know, the mobile phones and everything else. So I just offer that as a thought.
Well, just to reassure you, I agree with you, whether it has to be the statutory one of youth clubs, but that did come up at that rather difficult public meeting at Nansen Road in Ipswich just over 2 weeks ago. And I did say, well, maybe it was a mistake to remove those youth services, but of course what I did say to people then, now that decision was made a few years ago, probably for the right reasons. We can't undo that, that's happened, but what we've got to do is to look forward. I'm talking to someone earlier, a gentleman here this evening. We've got to draw a line in the sand and say, well, now what can we do together going forward? So you definitely need a range of activity. One of the things that we fund each year, we pay £85,000 a year to Positive Futures from, you know, yours and my money again. Now they are people who really do focus on those difficult background, difficult start line, call it whatever you like to, and they do actually aim to get those hard to reach people. And I think I'm right in saying they came to our last accountability performance panel. I think I'm right in saying they reached 2,500 youngsters last year, something like that, colossal amount. Now the cost per individual, actually, for the mayhem that could be caused if they weren't there, is actually quite small. So great believers in that. We've done other things, for example in Ipswich we Inspire Suffolk, and they get those who are 16, 17, 18 years old, a little bit older than a lot of people who go to the Porch Project. That's worked very well. Some of the opportunities are much more specialised. The Rotary Youth Leadership Academy, we give them a small grant. Maybe they only take 7 or 8 youngsters. These are over 18, but those who perhaps haven't got the confidence, the best start in life, that's a very small contribution. But what it does do is prove with the right approach you can make a difference. Then it comes down to finding the resources to do it. And that's where we all have a problem. But I believe, if we work together, we can do so much more with what we've got. So we've got to be innovative. We don't want more of the same. That's very obvious. And it does require change. We're all happy to change. We just need other people to come along with us. And as I say, business sector, charitable sector, voluntary, it's about who's doing it. So we're definitely on the case. Very good point, and I absolutely agree with you. So thank you very much for raising it. Lady here.
Thank you. You've been in post some years now. I hope you're still enjoying it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you must have learnt an awful lot over the last few years. And undoubtedly there's still an awful lot more to learn. You seem to be doing a good job about initiatives and getting funding. Loads of things have been mentioned this evening that I hadn't got a clue about. I think maybe some of the problem is you're not publicising the good stuff that you do more. Some of the statistics might not be sort of quite as good as you would like the public to be aware of. For example, the percentage of crimes that are solved. But some of the things need to get out there.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yes, I do enjoy the role. It's a hugely privileged role. I'm very humbled, I suppose, when I get comments like that. So it's very kind of you. But for me, it's representing the whole of Suffolk, forget party politics and all that jazz. Actually, that's what really makes me tick. But you can't do it on your own. You have to work with people. Gareth and I, we do a lot together. We have those conversations. Sometimes we have a bit of, set to, but that's good and that's what it should be about. If we have agreement on everything, we never make any change. But we do that because we get on well, and that's really important. We do that and do have that difference of view. Also applies to members of our team and all. It's everybody, right? So that's how we do it. I certainly take your point about publicity. I would suppose before Gareth was in post and before he came and worked for Suffolk, I think Chris, our chief exec there, would say that's something I've always been concerned about, the communication, the publicity, not for publicity's sake, but trying to spread awareness. I think, to be fair, one of the big challenges, because this was a completely new role, we didn't start with a blank sheet of paper per se. There was all sorts of regulations and protocols and so on. But from the public-facing point of view, there was pretty useless publicity about what the role was even about. So we started, from that perspective, with a blank sheet of paper. But I think we're getting there. There is a lot more to do. Have I learned a lot? My God, I couldn't even get on board to death with that. And life is always one great big long experience. You learn more, and that's not in any way meant to be patronising. I will tell, just for example, doesn't apply quite so much out here in rural areas. I live up in Ireland, Suffolk boy, born and bred in rural areas. But, for example, I'd never been to a mosque in my life before I started this role. But if you are going to try and relieve some of these difficulties and tensions, a lot of them are down to misunderstandings. You have to reach out to people. You've got to be available, and you've got to be, I think you've still got to be yourself, and you've got to be accessible. And that's one thing I've learned. Don't try and be something you're not. I'd hate to do that. I don't think I'd be any good at that anyway. And you get what you get, warts and all. I don't get warts anyway. So, but that is a crucial part, because I think the other big challenge, I've been amazed at how the pattern of crime has changed in the 5 years. The online issues using technology, modern domestic day slavery, I've never even heard of that before. Female genital mutilation, yes, it occurred, but it didn't become an issue here. I have been deeply moved and traumatised on occasions when I've come across some of the issues revolving around domestic violence, domestic abuse, serious sexual offences. You sort of heard about them, but I've had a very sheltered, lucky background, never come across that, and I found that quite troubling. But I think collectively, as a team approach, we have made a huge impact on dealing with domestic abuse and domestic violence, but my God, there's a long way to go. Just so you know, we have actually spent, and I get the publicity bit about that, I think I'm right in saying we spent over £3 million on yours and my money on dealing with victims of domestic abuse, setting up the new IDPA service, Independent Domestic Violence Advisors. Most of the victims we know are women, not exclusively, and we are making big strides for that. The training the constabulary does much greater awareness on the police force side as well. But this again is an example of the multi-agency approach. You're not going to get enforcement policing your way out of this dreadful issue on its own. How do you break the cycle? Children involved in that, I'm deeply concerned about, because of course if they live in an abusive environment at home, we know they're highly likely to be the perpetrators of the future. So it all comes back, starting at the beginning, and I'll be quiet in a minute. But another very good example, that potentially affects all of us, and I was talking to a business group a while ago, it affects the private sector as well, because as you can imagine, anybody who's the victim of serious domestic abuse at home, an adult, is never going to be as productive at work as they would be otherwise. So there's that, without being soppy about it, that duty of care and recognition of what goes on, to try and do more to look after each other. Now it's a big ask, but it is important. And then if you're going to do that, you've got an issue, what are you going to do about it? Have we got the right levels of support and help, counselling? And to me, we put quite a lot into counselling. It's not really our primary role, that should be public health on the other side. So these problems are enormous, and they can only be solved once again with us acting together. So, my God, but they take a lot to learn still. Yeah, no, it's a crazy world actually, but thank you for raising it. At the back there, and then I'll come back over.
Right, so first of all, as the County Councillor for Hadleigh, I thank you and your team for coming along tonight. And actually, I'm surprised at the numbers here, and from what I'm hearing, many of them are from the outlying villages. You've just been on the County Council. I appreciate very much how our budgets have been cut back from since 2010. So really resources are tight, and you focus very much on, as you say, domestic violence and that sort of area, similar to at county level. We've largely protected funding for adult social care, children, young people, and that's sort of taken a hit on things that affect most of us most of the time, like roads.
Yeah.
And I noticed one of your points here is sorting out illegal parking in Suffolk and outlying villages, whereas here, Hadleigh, we're a town.
Yeah.
And we certainly have our big problem here is Benton Street and heading south out towards the A12. And certainly at the weekends, parking on yellow lines along the high street is a problem. So how often do you come along and police this area? And is there any way you could increase it perhaps?
Direct answer. Let me just say one thing first of all about civil parking enforcement. I said this last year and probably the year before. This is doing my head in. One of the things I have learned is how slow the wheels of government grind, almost down to downright incompetence. I am really annoyed, bitterly disappointed. I think it must be nearly 2 years ago the issue of civil parking came up with the vendors. Everybody's sick and tired of people who are, frankly, it's antisocial behaviour. People know damn well if they park on the double yellow line, they shouldn't. They deserve to, as far as I'm concerned, have their car towed away and crushed, but that isn't possible. But people do it, it's a conscious effort, like parking in a disabled way in Sudbury, that's a big issue. So, but we agreed nearly 2 years ago to move, with the support of all the local authorities, apart from Ipswich who already do civil parking enforcement, to move responsibility from the constabulary to all the local authorities. Now, Babergh, all the districts and boroughs put in 10,000 quid. We've put in 190,000 quid. The county are doing their share for conforming with the traffic regulation order, making sure all the lines, the signage are there, because you can't enforce it, of course, if the lines are all scrubbed out. We agree that everything is going into plan. The one issue that is blocking it is the inability of the Department of Transport, the Minister, or the Secretary of State to get a two-sided piece of paper, and I'm not exaggerating, that's all it is. I've got a copy back in the office to sign the order over. It's been done so many times before. We're getting all sorts of mouldy excuses why they can't do it. I've even offered sarcastically go and help him hold his hand to sign the bit of paper. Everything is being done to that, and it is driving me round the twist because the amount of time that these guys have spent, they all know they'd like to do more, but is that really a priority when someone, I mean, you know, Gareth can answer in a minute, but this inability of government to recognise what we need here is patently absurd. There are very few areas left in England and Wales that don't have civil parking enforcement. There's only 3 counties. Cambridgeshire is one, I don't know which the other one is. There's only something like 24 districts and boroughs that don't do it. So it's been done so many times before, and it just really annoys me.
Excuse me, what does this piece of paper give you then when you sign?
Well, it's the authority. We can't just do it without the authority.
You can't go and put a ticket on.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. No, that's a separate issue. And that scheme,
I see.
That scheme would be self-financing. It wouldn't cost the local taxpayer any. And because at the moment, the money for parking fines goes to the government. If it's a civil parking enforcement, the local authority's money stays here and finances the scheme.
Okay.
So, Gareth, I'm sure you can say
and part of the requirements, as well as the traffic regulation orders that the county have to deal with, the business case has to show that you can, if I say police, but you can manage parking effectively. So if you don't put forward a business case that says you're going to put in the right amount of resources to be able to deal with it properly, then you're not allowed to hand it across. Okay? So everybody's agreed to make sure that we've got the resource, or the districts will have the resource to be able to deal with it. Specifically in relation to your question, this is something we look at all around the county, Yet we do have purge days. I can also tell you, and we've been across in Hadleigh where the most prolific ticket giver was with the organisation, and as soon as she walked around the corner, everybody just went back and parked down the street. And we were there, we were actually there and observed it on one day, you know, when you saw this happen. So one is people have to recognise, you know, that it's something that is antisocial behaviour and really upsets people. I've got a whole load of abuse travelling through Hadleigh because I had the audacity to ask somebody to move, and it's, you know, so I know how tricky it can get down here. But they, you know, for the reasons you said, we have to prioritise. People would you know, shoot us down in flames if we didn't prioritise. But we do say that when you've got the time, do the purges. And when you do the purges, pop it on Twitter. So you know, so we do them, but we don't do it as often as we want to. And the only effective way is to get that order signed and to get it handed across to the districts where they've all agreed. We'll put this level of resource in, we'll fund it, we'll finance it, and we'll make sure that the parking is dealt with effectively.
So we'll get on to our MPs and sit back.
Yeah, we met James Cartledge, had a 6-monthly meeting with all the MPs. Not all of them turned up, but he was certainly there. And well, he has offered to get one of the head honchos from the Department of Transport and ourselves and himself in the room. I think I might take that piece of paper up with me. But no, it really isn't that ridiculous. And I'm not pulling any punches, it's just to say we've got everything worked out.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why what the delay is, but you can probably imagine what the excuse is, but that's a lot of nonsense. Anyway, but thank you very much, Catherine.
You might have already answered this question, because I apologise, I was late. Never house. We have our old police station here, and I understand it's manned a lot of the time. Would it not be possible for a day a week to have it open to the public, to make it accessible for people for when they have an issue?
We do a load of work around people visiting stations, and people don't. They do, but not very often. And you know, the best response I've heard to this was given by PCSO in Ipswich, because we have to make sure our funding is there. We want to be accessible to people, and we want to make sure that the highest volume of people actually get to see it. And this PCSO, without being prompted and with no design on promotion or anything, when he was asked the question in my earshot, and I was listening, said, "I'm a mobile police station. If I was sitting behind a desk in a police station, then people wouldn't come in. I know it's only one day, and I get what you're saying about one day, but actually, even with that, people have to choose that bit. So I'd rather they were out and engaging.
I don't mean that person has to sit there, man it, because they're behind there a lot of the time anyway, doing paperwork and other duties. Just so that if on that particular day of the week you ring a bell, someone will come from behind to the front to man the desk, and you speak to a face.
Yeah, and my answer, because I know the inspector's saying it doesn't happen, but what my view is, you know, I don't want police officers sitting in the police station. That's why I don't know if you hear when we talk about the mobile devices. They get their stuff, they go out, they don't go back to the police station, they can do everything outside of the police station. So I really get what you're saying. I think, you know, the issue around the engagement officer, I think, answers your question, and I don't know if you were here when we said that, but this is where we've got a dedicated member of staff now that will come out and will engage and will be in the places where, you know, they can interact the most with people as well, and that'll be publicised. There'll be a lot of work around it. So that's where I want the organisation to go to, where we're far more accessible, far more open, and what we do have, of course, at the police stations is the ability to be able to get through to the control room, and if there is somebody there, they do say help.
I mean, it's fair to say, if we have a lot more resources, yes, you have what you want, but we haven't. So it was a very carefully worked out decision. The public access desks, as Gareth said, it was all worked out looking at the visitor numbers over the days. I mean, we had some police stations, I can't remember what the happy figures were, but some of them were in single figures for a week. So if you have someone full-time doing that, and of course the frustration you can then get, if you said yes it was open one day a week and they was happy there but then get called out, then they'll get a whole load of earache, well there wasn't anybody there when we called. And I do get what you're saying, we all like the familiar friendly face, and as I say, if we had all the resources in the world or more resources, then you'd look at it. So the short answer to a question, could you have that? Yes, you could, but that would be at the expense of other things. So it is checks and balances, but you know, as you were saying, it's about the communication and explanation and so on. So, you know, we just need to do what we can to publicise that more, and I wish we could do that, but things have changed. And you know, with that change in the pattern of crime, with all the online stuff and what we call the hidden harm, well, that isn't going to be solved with somebody there. So it is a damn difficult balance to get. I don't think there's any question about that. So can't provide you what we want really, but if we did, I think it was the gentleman over there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman. I chair the Babergh Police and Parish Forum, and over the years I've had great support of Inspector Horton. Now you're getting new community sergeants. Can I expect the same support from the police I've been getting over the years?
I would hope.
Yeah, I mean,
go on,
I gave the update on the communication officers did at the last meeting, and just obviously committed to myself and Joe still attending the parish forum meeting. So because you know, I want to be visible, I don't want to be stuck in a building and in an office myself. So it's an opportunity to the parish forum, and I've got similar meetings in Ipswich for people to come and meet me and to meet Sergeant Mears. So that commitment is still there, definitely.
Okay.
Good.
Do you ever think that it will get back to? When I was a young girl, I was told, like, go to a policeman, he's safe, he's your friend, everything. And of course, you see your local bobby on the beat. Do you think we'll ever get back to where you see the policeman walking around again? I mean, I know you guys are busy, but don't really see much in Hadleigh Lane, but is there ever aspirations to get back to that?
I think if I was being brutally honest, you know, and as I often say, this the days of Jack Warner and Dixon and Doc Green, sadly are gone. I mean, when I was a boy, I lived at Whitneysham. We had PCCs who lived in the police house at Ashbocking next to the Nelson pub, and he went around on his bicycle for 3 or 4 villages, everybody knew him. But you see, society's changed as well. We haven't got the same stability in communities either. That changing the pattern of crime, the advent of technology is a real boom in many ways, but it did not bring some other problems. So, I mean, those were the days when they were near everybody had a telephone in the house. You remember the old press button A and B and all that stuff, and you could get through the STD calls, and you know. But that just shows the step change that 96% of the population have a smartphone. So, sadly, no. But what I do think there is a slight improvement, and organisations, be it Neighbourhood Watch, Community Speed Watch, all the volunteering side do have a crucial role to play, and I think somehow you've got to get back to that more, sound very happy clappy this, which is unusual for me, but that sort of caring, sharing attitude within communities and villages, that is important. You know, if you look at the changing population, ageing population, rural isolation is a big issue. I mean, I looked at some of these new housing blocks in Ipswich yesterday. I mean, you're going to have isolation there. What the hell do they think they're doing? Building 7-storey flats where you've got 2 or 3 children, 7 floors up, nowhere to play, nothing to do. This isn't a recipe for disaster in the future. So we've all somehow tacitly allowed it to happen. And certainly blame politicians, but you end up with what you elect. Don't really comment. But there is I'm trying to be seriously, that is the trouble. If people don't take part in the system, that doesn't help either. So collectively, that's another issue, isn't it? But that's a good point. But no, I don't think we are going to. But there are better ways of communicating as well, which I hope to some extent addresses the balance. We are getting to the end, but we will take the last question then.
Sorry, just very briefly, CCTV, we've talked about the problems at the cricket club and some of the problems in the skate park. Is CCTV viable? Is it so incredibly expensive? Is it pointless? Is it just not an answer at all? Is it monitored? Yeah, is it monitored, and how, you know?
Well, that's what's handy, because it's run from Sudbury. We have a voluntary scheme, which is a flagship around the force. I think we do it for Felixstowe as well now. But we have a team of volunteers that base themselves at Sudbury Police Station, sometimes during the day, but certainly Friday and Saturday evenings. And they monitor the cameras for Hadleigh as well from there. And there has been some exchanges between myself and the local authorities of Babergh and Suffolk about the future of that scheme, whether it will stay as a voluntary scheme, will it go to West Suffolk, as in Bury St Edmunds, where they have 24/7 monitoring. There's a lot of questions around cost and things. So to answer the question, there is still CCTV coverage in Hadleigh, which is monitored from Sudbury, recorded 24/7, but monitored at certain points by the volunteers. And they're the sort of discussions we're going to have around. It's really expensive to put a new camera into a site. We're talking thousands of pounds. So the local authority are quite cautious about doing that, because then the problem might move and you put one everywhere. So it's a local authority decision as to where the cameras go, but the scheme is up and running.
There's a bit of work I'm doing, because I think that there is a better way that Suffolk can do CCTV, because we do like our own little isolated systems here, there and everywhere. So there's some work I've been doing with the chief executives of the local authorities in the county, just to look to see if there's a new infrastructure going in terms of a network. So actually we may be able to put stuff back and down, up and down the new fibre networks. So we're just looking at that. The second thing is, nothing stops you as individuals getting in an affordable system into your own premises. And I'm an office at home as well, and you can get a really, I think, very good system which can cover, I know it's a much smaller area, because the big cameras are very powerful, but there's nothing to stop you as individuals in terms of businesses, in terms of sports facilities, or in terms of individual homes, as I say, to actually look at a system which is HD and gives a really good, crisp image, and actually gives you a lot of security around sort of some of the stuff.
It must be a good deterrent just to have something up there, whether it's working or not.
Do you have to register with the Information Commissioner's Office if you have
there's guidance online in relation to it, so I won't go through the guides now, but there is guidance online, but if you make sure it's in a private area, it's much easier for you.
So it is a useful tool. Okay, very last question.
I realise you need to go home. I'm hearing a lot about austerity and pressure, and I'm a teacher, and I understand that because our roll numbers are going up to deal with the fact that we're underfunded. And what I've heard from you is that Suffolk is underfunded and you're lobbying government. I'd like to think the education system is too. Is there anything we can do to help support that? I mean, obviously you're providing evidence, no doubt, but could we put on a petition, use online, some kind of pressure to the MPs or whoever it is? And what can we say which would actually make a difference?
What I think, there's been a bit of a step change in the attitude of the Home Office, and I think we have a chance, there's no guarantee, we have to keep the pressure on, but it needs to be based on evidence, what the issues are. This is quite a big question, so I'll be as brief as...
Maybe you want, I don't know, put something out to us that says...
Well, I think that's what we'll do, so that's why having all your contact details is really important. We will come up with the evidence over the next 3 or 4 months, because the chance is not necessarily for next year where we keep the pressure on. The national one is to get more funding for policing generally, but let me just share with you, within that pot, we need a far better deal. I'm fed up with money.
Same for education.
Well, it is, and health, everything. Just to give you a comparison, nothing against the old boys in Norfolk, but they don't have the same level of work as we do. But just so you know, from Home Office, they get £5 per head of the population more than we do in Suffolk. If we had the same level of funding as Norfolk, we would have an extra £3.5 million. Because governments of all colours, coalitions, call it what you like, haven't had the gobble to address it. It's been like this for a generation.
And hence our education is not...
And it's the same with education, health, roads, you name it, Suffolk gets treated as a rural backwater where we're all supposed to be ignorant peasants with smocks and pitchforks. Well, we're not. And part of my
royal family living in the county.
So, but we've got an opportunity. The other thing is, it's disproportionate that the level of police funding from the council tax is about 43% in Suffolk. Compare that with Merseyside, theirs is only 18%. How any government of any colour can say that even begins to be equitable beats me. I think Surrey's even worse, I think that's 50%, but they've got lots of money down there, so it's different. But no, but seriously, these inequities, so you're held right into MPs and so on. And I have to say, to be fair, certainly 4 of our MPs, and I won't use a name, but it doesn't apply to here, that he is certainly very supportive. Peter Aldous has done more than others, but there's 1 or 2 that should be ashamed of themselves, and I pointed out to them that actually they wouldn't be in government if they weren't elected by people in Suffolk. I won't say any more than that, but it's, they are there to represent Suffolk as well as being a government running out. So we have got a lot to do, but your help with anybody here would be grateful.
What I'm saying is I think we need some real facts to be able to...
No, well, we will do that. We had to go last time.
And we'll all go, you know, get on something.
We had a lot of support that came in, and we will visit that again because I'm not giving up on that. I'm sure. Right, I'm going to guillotine it now. Thank you very, very much indeed for coming. It's been a very, very useful evening for all of us. Thank you to everybody at the front and the colleagues at the back.